We made a video of unboxing and shooting this 1851 Pietta brass frame. That it's an engraved gun, and some of the things I did not include, I didn't talk too much about, like the synthetic grip here and just kind of how that is, and also the arbor here, how that fits in the barrel itself. So a couple things like that I'd like to go through and give a little more details on the gun itself. We're going to shoot this gun here in a bit, but first I want to interested in checking out a couple things on it to see how these things are put together. Like one of the things I guess would be these plastic grips that are on here. These are kind of a brown checker. They got a really good feel to them. You get a good grip on that. But I want to take the screw out here and see what's inside it. I did notice a slight overhang up here on the top of the grips, but these are that way because I imagine these are kind of mass produced and they're not individually fit to the guns, I think, like the wooden ones are. When I push on that screw, a little metal insert that dropped out of the side over here, which is okay. I'll be careful not to mess up the brass here by jamming a screwdriver in this or something to wedge these out. These are actually coming out pretty decent. Okay, here's what that looks like on the inside. And the other side is done a little differently. It's got actually kind of a plastic, called a liner in here, that kind of simulates what they do on their wood one piece, or their wood grips. I've got my spring here. I'm not going to push this out, but I can see what that is. And that's a very solid way of putting that plastic on. There are two pegs, actually three of them here, and those are going to fit into the three holes here. And the way this thing is designed, this right side of the grip is not going to move at all. Once the left one gets pinned into that, plus the center screw, that one's going to stay put too. So I'm pretty impressed with the way they've done that for rather inexpensive grips. Okay, there's a number of things we can check out on the gun. One of them I'll check right off to see how the lockup is, how tight that cylinder is when it locks up. There's absolutely no movement there. Well, if we got that hammer back, let's check the pull on it. We got our gauge here. Slide that back to 0. About 2.5 pounds. That's right where I'd want it as far as especially target shooting goes. If you're going to use it in the field, you might want a little heavier pull, and I'm detecting no creep at all on that. Okay, so that checks out very good. I made a video about unboxing this gun belongs to my brother, and I had a couple of comments on the video that dry firing is not good for the gun, and it'll actually dent the nipples up here, and it doesn't do the hammer any good either in this section here. And we're aware of that, and so is he. But he pulled out of the box and wanted to check the trigger pull on the gun. So what he did is he actually dry fired it one time, which isn't going to bother things too much. But it's a good idea not to dry fire guns. But I wanted to point out something here on the Pietta when I'm checking this gun out that might be kind of interesting to see actually how it does on those nipples. Now what I'm going to do is draw one of these out about a turn. So that's a half a turn, so that's one turn. And I'll slide that on the gun here. I want to bring that half cock so I don't mess up my cylinder here. I'm sliding that in. I'm shoving that in. Shoving that in until it bottoms out. Next thing I'm going to do is lower the hammer and force that hammer against that nipple. I think you can see there that the cylinder actually moves out, telling us that nipple is turned out full turn. That hammer is definitely going to hit that nipple. Okay, let's tighten that back in to where Pietta had that thing and try it again. And I'm shoving that back as far as I can. I'm going to lower the hammer then. I'm seeing no movement in that cylinder. It's hard to see, make a measurement there, but this hammer comes down against the frame, and it can only move so far forward. So if your percussion nipple is just the right length, you know, those caps do have some powder inside there, and there are actually some distance involved there. So to set that off, you don't need that hammer necessarily hitting that back of the nipple here. If it gets close, you're good. And the way this one is set up, it looks to me like it's not going to actually hit that nipple if you do dry fire it. It's going to fall back on the frame instead. So thinking about the idea that possibly the hammer actually hits the frame here and doesn't come quite close enough to hit those nipples if they've engineered it that way, kind of intrigued me. So I come up with a couple of systems, or a couple of ways maybe of measuring that. One, I used the vernier, and I came up with about 1,000th to 2,000 short. But the other way I'm going to do here, I'm going to use some blackening, and I'm going to put a little bit of that on a knife here. I'm going to scrape some of that off on the nipple here that we're going to test. So we're going to blacken this section here of just the very tip of that nipple. I've taken a Q-tip here and cleaned off the end of the hammer as good as I can. Now what we're going to do is slide that cylinder on there, if I can orientate it with the one I got the black stuff on. I'll find that because I set it down. It is marked right there, so we'll set that on back on the gun. I want to in the half cock position. Okay, then we'll slide our barrel on. And what we'll do next, holding that barrel tight like that, is we're going to draw the hammer to the full cock position. We're going to lower it and push it ahead as far as we can. Now if that's contacting the nipple, then we should get our blackening here on the back of our hammer. And maybe we will. What I'll do here is take a Q-tip and swipe that across there once. And I'm really not seeing anything noticeable on that, so next we're going to do is take that nipple, again I got to find it. It's the one here. I'm going to back that out about a half a turn. And we're going to try the same thing then. And again, we're going to swipe the Q-tip across that hammer. Now we're getting some black on there, and I can actually, I'm sure it won't show up on the camera, but I can see a little marking over here on this side. If I rub that with the Q-tip, it goes away. And there's the blackening that we get off of that. So it appears it does touch it when it's about a half turn out, but when it was all the way in, I wasn't getting any contact. So maybe that's a second way of telling us that these things are pretty well designed, it appears, and if those nipples are tight in there, if you actually go to dry firing that gun, the hammer is likely to come back onto the frame and you know, and not actually hit the nipple. And we're not saying the dry firing is good on a gun, or we're not advising it, but just saying that that's an interesting thing that I know I wasn't aware of it. We'll check out our cylinder, see how much end play we've got. Almost nothing there. Feeling very little movement in that. Again, that's a good thing. So alright, let's see if we can, sometimes you have to use a wooden something or other to wrap on that wedge to get that to come out, but this one seems to be pretty loose. Let's see how our barrel comes off. And the wedges actually come off out. For some folks that's a good thing, but that screw there is intended to keep that wedge on the barrel, and I guess the reason for that would be so it doesn't drop off into the sand. You lose the thing and then you're kind of SOL. Well, slid off really easy there. Oh, another thing I'll check on it while that's off is just to kind of see what there is as far as how this anvil here, arbor, and I guess is what we'd call it, that holding the cylinder in place, where that ends up here in the barrel. Because if there's extra, if this hole is bored down extra, if this is too short, then when you drive that wedge in, you'll actually tweak the barrel up into the cylinder. So you can kind of check that by sliding that in there and seeing how it's going to the full position right now. Actually, I think I'll take my cylinder out. Put on safety, half cock. I want to see how I put it in the barrel. That'll work well. I want to see how this fits with the alignment here. And so all that's going to go in there, bottomed out. And that actually clears and comes in and hits that peg. So that is perfect. If it goes in further than that and you can't turn this down and it actually hits the frame down there, then I think you got too short of a arbor here, or the hole is bored too far and you have to shim that or something, or at least not pound the wedge in that tight. Now we get some idea if this gun is going to shoot high or low by putting her back together here. I'm going to leave the barrel wedge out right now. Bringing back the hammer to full cock position and having a straight edge of some sort. This isn't going to be perfect here. Lined up from the front sight, top of the hammer here, and also on the front sight. And I'm looking to see how close that line will be to the barrel right in this section. See how much clearance there is there. And I think the way this is set up, you may shoot a little high, but it's not going to be maybe not too bad. Of course, it's 44 caliber, got a light barrel where you expect quite a bit of recoil to it. That'll toss the barrel up. So we may shoot high, but that's one of the reasons we're going to check it out on the range here. And the second reason will be to see if it's shooting left or right, and get some idea of whether or not we have to make any sight modifications. They're tough to make here because you got a fixed sight on the back, fixed sight on the front. So you're pretty much going to live with what they've got, unless you want to make some modifications to the gun the way it came originally, at least. I can mention too that I think one of the reasons that some of these guns will shoot high, a lot depends on where that, maybe all depends on where that hammer is in this full cock position when it's brought back to here. Because if this trigger is a little longer, or the notch that call it the sear on the end of the trigger falls into when the hammer is in a different position, this hammer could end up being cocked in this position, back down here. Now I dropped that considerable amount. And the golden rule here is we move the rear sight in the direction we want the bullet to move. So if you want the bullet to go down, you can move your rear sight down, and that would do it. So what I'm saying is, if that sear on the trigger here actually engaged in the hammer and locked it up back in this position, it would even shoot lower yet. On some guns I've seen and had, it locks about here, right about in that position, and that's definitely going to shoot high because it should be back in this spot here where it's doing. So I've got a little extra movement here that's telling me that there could be a little longer trigger here, the sear end. It it would definitely allow it to shoot lower, but we're not going to be able to change that either. So, along with the notch on the hammer that it engages in. So, anyway, that's just an idea of why some of these guns will shoot higher than others, because it depends on that. Especially if somebody's done some work on the trigger here to lighten it up or something, they've shortened it, then it's going to latch up back in here someplace, and then you got a gun definitely going to shoot high. So, okay, with that, I think we're going to put some dry rags through this thing, clean out our cylinder here. Some we may blow some air out through those things, make sure we don't have any oil in the nipples and things. Now, the gun was made in 2021. They got a 21 stamp on this. They went away from the date codes. I think they're actually stamping the date on there that it was manufactured. I did take a dry rag and ran that into the chambers. Also, air compressor in there. I did notice some small fumes coming out the nipples there of probably oil in there. Checked the barrel out, run that dry patch through there. Came out pretty decent. There are some signs in here that maybe things weren't 100% after there were, if it was test fire or something. I'm looking at some, maybe some fouling left, maybe there are machine marks, not sure exactly what that is, but, you know, wanted to mention that. Otherwise, we'll get to loading this gun up now.